All right, so I'm going to get us started and to just at least go through a couple of the housekeeping components. So for those of you who do not spend your entire life on Zoom the way I do, up in the upper right corner, you will have a little view button. And when you click on view, it will give you speaker and gallery. I don't even know what immersive is. But if you click on speaker, what that will do is that'll highlight the person who is speaking. And particularly since there are going to be many of us, it makes it much easier for you to follow what's going on. We ask that you keep questions until the end. And if you could please mute yourself during the presentation. If you have a question that you're worried you might forget, in there at the bottom, there is a little chat button. And you can click on the chat button and actually type the question in, and then I will see it and be able to read it off at the end. What we're going to do is we're going to have a presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A period at the end, in which it will be a freewheeling conversation. You're welcome to speak live then and unmute yourself and put on your camera. So I'm Carol Summerfield. I am the Executive Director at the History Center. I would like to thank you all for coming. I would also like to thank Maddie Dugan for sponsoring these Zoom lectures. It has been an amazing boon to us to be able to present, because as you can tell, we gather people from all over the country now, and it's been a phenomenal addition to the services we offer at the History Center. And now I would like to introduce Deborah McMahon Osterholtz, and I apologize because there's so much here, I'm going to read a little bit of it. So Irene and Franklin McMahon were world travelers who became internationally known for writing and for their art. We've been the lucky recipients of several Lent pieces. We actually have one on display right now from the Vatican II under spiritual travel. But this book that Deborah did is focused on sort of life with this incredible traveling family. And we're very excited to hear your stories, and take us away.
Thank you.
Are you able to share?
I'm trying to.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Oh,
Let's see. It's coming. Okay.
there you go. All right. Yep.
There we go.
Perfect.
Good evening. Welcome all. Thank you for zooming in. This photo is the first McMahon Lake Forest home. The house was recently renovated. Many McMahons have called Lake Forest home for 70 years. My parents, Irene and Franklin, moved to Lake Forest in 1952 after having built a modern mid-century Edward Humrick home and studio. I am Deborah. Some of you know me as Debbie, fourth born and first McMahon child born in Lake Forest. Irene and Franklin raised 9 children in town. My brother Mark, who followed in my father's footsteps, continues to live in a Lake Forest Humrick home studio. His daughter Meryl is also raising her family in town. In 1960, the McMahons moved to a house on Mayflower Road. My parents became well-known reporters. My mother was a travel writer, and my father was a reportage artist who is known for sketching our nation's history. He covered important trials, including the Emmett Till, conspiracy, and Watergate trials, US politics and conventions, the Vatican, civil rights in Nassau. He was in mission control the day Neil Armstrong landed and walked on the moon. It was in his home studio that my father added color to his on-the-site drawings. While Franklin McMahon's work took him all over the world, Lake Forest was his home base. The McMahons were a creative family. Many of the children became professional artists or worked in art-related fields. In 1980, my parents downsized to a modern Keck house. Keck was the architect for the House of Tomorrow at the Chicago World's Fair. This house was recently added to the National Registry of Historic Places. It is currently undergoing renovation, and today the Tribune had an amazing article about the history of this house. It has twice escaped demolition. The inspiration for this book was a talk I did for USK Talks. Urban sketchers from around the world tuned in to listen to USK Talks Season 2 finale episode Franklin McMahon, Reportage Master, 1921 to 2012. This talk is available on YouTube. We talked about how my father changed from being a cartoonist to an artist reporter, his work covering important trials, political campaigns, NASA, the Vatican, and his travel reporting, which he did with my mother, Irene. Much of his career has been documented in books and is online, but not the travel writing. So this is my book, The World is Your Studio, Travel Stories by Irene and Franklin McMahon. The book has 2 chapters. The first is The Great Search, and the second, Franklin McMahon, the Artist as a Reporter. The Great Search includes 20 travel stories, 5 including travels with children and grandchildren. My parents' first travel stories celebrated family trips to Spain, the Mississippi River, along the Great River Road from Minnesota to New Orleans, telling about rodeos in Iowa, Colorado, and Wyoming, and also reporting on the St. Lawrence Seaway. A smaller group traveled to Germany to retrace my father's World War II route. Their first published travel article was in 1957. It was An American Family Goes to Spain. My parents write, the first recorded invasion of the Iberian Peninsula was by the Phoenicians about 2000 BC. Since then, the onslaught have been many and from many directions, but perhaps none has been more relentless than the invasion which has inundated Spain in recent years, the flood of the American tourists. About this time last year, Irene and Franklin McMahon of Lake Forest, Illinois, rounded up their 7 children, packed their belongings, and set out to discover the land of Columbus. Our base of operation was a rented villa at Torremolinos, a sleepy little fishing village turning international resort near Malaga on the southern costa del Sol. From there, we drove along the sea and up into the Sierra Nevadas. We picnicked in the ruins of the old castles, visited historic landmarks, and became aficionados of the bull ring and the flamenco dancing. All of this comes under the heading of sightseeing, but it wasn't long before we realized that we were the sight, with Mommy in her blue stockings bought in Paris, Mary and Debbie in slacks, and Patrick in his Davy Crockett suit. We were followed wherever we went. Seldom had the Spaniards seen such a large party of Americanos, and so many of them below the age of reason. Why did we go to Spain? What was its appeal for Americans? What was it our children learned in Spain? What was it we learned? Lessons of history, of the Moors and their magnificent buildings, of the Spaniards in the struggle for freedom. Lessons of geography, of the tragedy of Spain, her used up land, her work-worn people. Lessons in thrift and frugality. These are the things that stick in your mind. And the good times, and our friends from many nations who lived in Torremolinos, and our Spanish friends, Ramon, who delivered the firewood and often took Mark along to help him drive the horse cart, and the milkman who always gave rides on his donkey, and Carlos and Antonio and Maria, and the sheep and the shepherd. Always the animals. Our children always remembered the animals. Lessons in religion and the stoic calm of the Spaniards, and our parish priest who said, "It's good you have come. Sometimes the Spanish think they are the only Catholics. These are photos of Irene and Franklin watching their children dance the flamenco and out touring Spain. There was a second Spain article, and it's called Far From Home. My mother writes, one Thanksgiving, we found ourselves far from home in Torremolinos on the southern coast of Spain. Our rented villa was high on a cliff above the Mediterranean, but the view was lost on our 7 small children who wanted a Thanksgiving that had always known it. They did not count view among their blessings. We had read that the domestication of the common turkey probably began in Mexico and was introduced into Europe by the Spanish in the early 16th century. We were sure there must have been a few turkeys around. Unfortunately, our limited Spanish did not include the word for the majestic bird. So after much sign language and gesturing, a light went on and our Spanish friends said, mi grande polo, very big chicken, to which we nodded in delight. To our surprise, the turkey arrived on hoof a few days before Thanksgiving and was contained within our courtyard. What followed should have been predictable. The bird became a family pet. The children talked with it and fed it crackers from the kitchen. It was the center of attention for those few days until the moment of truth arrived. It was time to roast the turkey. Special effort went into setting the table with flowers and best linens. We said grace, and then the beautifully brown turkey was brought in. Our hungry children lost their appetite. Even the stuffing had no appeal. It was more like a funeral than a holiday meal and far from a Norman Rockwell picture. One lesson we learned, far off places are never going to be exactly like home, but be thankful and enjoy the differences. Following the turkey dinner, the day picked up when we followed the young muchachos leading their donkeys down to a spectacular beach. The men loaded sand onto the donkeys for the construction of the large hotels that were beginning to sprout up along the sea. Later in the day, the coalman gave us rides in his horse cart. While visiting Torremolinos, Spain, my father painted this picture of 5 of his children playing. I'm the girl in the red dress. The family returned to the United States by ship, arriving in New York the fall of 1958. The next big adventure following the McMahons' return to the United States was a road trip to Canada along the St. Lawrence Seaway. This was 1960. This painting to the left we got a great view of the Moses Sander Power Project from the Canadian side. A transparent map here fascinated visitors. And this painting is twin locks permit ships to meet and pass in the Welland Canal. The ships are lifted 386 feet from Lake Ontario to Lake Erie. As we reached Niagara Falls, the colored lights were being turned on. We crossed the Rainbow Bridge in a blaze of glory. 35 years later, Irene and Franklin returned to Canada in the St. Lawrence Seaway with their children and grandchildren. This was 1994. 2 travel articles were written, one titled Surrounded by History While We're Making Our Own, and the other is The Wonderment of the St. Lawrence Seaway. My mother wrote, we were all decked out in blue plastic made of mist raincoats given to us by the ship's crew. Our small but sturdy craft bobbed and weaved in the horseshoe of the thundering waters of the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. We had grandchildren with us, and despite all assurances that it surely must have happened this way, at least since the days of Captain Ahab, we couldn't help but wonder what we'd gotten into. The challenge of the younger set was to see how wet they could get, all except Mary Irene, the 1-year-old, who was oblivious to the fact that we were in the midst of the greatest spectacle of North America, one of the 7 wonders of the world. She clung desperately to her mother. We were 3 generations, ranging from 1 year to 7 decades, ages spanning 70 years. It wasn't exactly a family reunion, but a vacation for those who could fit it into their schedule. We were reliving the adventure of our first trip to these parts 35 years ago with our grandchildren and their parents, history repeating itself. Then as now, we were lured by the stories of the ocean-going ships in the Great Lakes brought there by the St. Lawrence Seaway. 35 years ago, we arrived at the American side of the falls, just as the Canadian lights were being turned on, and drove across the Rainbow Bridge in a blaze of glory, speechless, completely magnetized by the excitement of the thundering torrent under, until someone remembered the day's wash hadn't been done, and we raced off to the laundromat. Traveling with our grandchildren and their parents, the moments seemed precious. We knew these times were fleeting, experiences to be relished in the midst of historical places while we were making a history of our own. The glory of the falls and the fascination of the Seaway moved us today as it did the first time we experienced them, but what fun it was to share that glory with a new generation. There was a trip in 1966 to search for Britain in Canada. There was an unforgettable trip when my parents returned to Germany with 3 teenagers. During World War II, my father had been a navigator and a cartoonist. In January of 1948, his plane was shot down over Germany. He parachuted down, was missing in action, captured, and became a prisoner of war. The war ended and he returned back to Chicago to marry my mother, his high school sweetheart. In 1991, there was dozing with the dinosaurs. My parents, now in their 70s, took 3 of their grandchildren to the Field of Natural History Museum, Chicago, for a kid-friendly sleepover after dark event. Irene says, we walked along a stretch of the Nile River and Jonathan was awarded a dinosaur hunting license. To the right, we have a painting of campers searching for a quiet place to sleep. And this upper middle painting is young people and their parents and grandparents are divided into small groups. On the list for most groups is the dinosaur lecture. And below we have a painting of a museum staff member giving directions for the games. When the children moved on, there was more time for writing and traveling. My parents visited Williamsburg and wrote The Untold Story, the colonial capital of Virginia unveils its secret side, the struggle of the first African Americans.
Deborah, we've lost your sound. Deborah?
Franklin and I had been driving then south from Chicago towards Cape Kennedy for the launching of Gemini 3. The news on the radio was filled with talk of the events in this small Alabama city that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had chosen for his encounter with the voting regulations of the South. King had been in Selma since the beginning of that year to organize a Black voter registration drive. Demonstrators had been arrested as local authorities tried to stop the registration process. King announced he would march from Selma to Montgomery, 50 miles away, to draw attention to the civil rights movement. We were hearing about the impasse of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, of a brutal Sunday beating, of peaceful demonstrators, of planned marches to the Dallas County Courthouse, of Negroes attempting to register to vote. We detoured and headed for Selma. In 1965, we stood in front of the Brown Chapel, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, that was the starting point for the demonstrations. It was here on January 2nd, 1965, that King defied a judge's injunction and led a rally promising demonstrations and even another march on Washington if voting rights for African Americans in the South were not guaranteed. The young people on one side of the barrier sang, the state troopers and sheriff's men on the other side stood firm and listened. King had sent out a plea for support, and hundreds had arrived about the same time we did to join the locals in these marches. The Bloody Sunday beatings on March 7th had been covered by nationwide TV, and now the New Day prominent clergymen, nuns, rabbis, and just plain folks were aligned along the barrier on Sylvan Street. They had come from all over America, swamping the small town, straining the resources of the church basement and school auditoriums. The police had logged in some 300 reporters and photographers. The stirring gospel beat of the Southern Church poured down these streets under the warm March sun as blacks and whites together prayed and sang, "We shall overcome." Later that day, they marched past Sheriff Clark and the troopers to the Dallas County Courthouse. We followed the march to its conclusion and then checked into the old Albert Hotel in time to see President Lyndon B. Johnson appear on the lobby television set, a live broadcast of his speech introducing the 1965 Voting Rights Act to a joint session of Congress. This is my father's drawing Confrontation. It is the Selma voter rights protesters being confronted by the police. It's currently in the collection of the Library of Congress. My father and mother loved everything about aviation. Following my father's World War II navigating experience, he covered the American space program. He covered the launching of Gemini 3, was aboard the USS Wasp for the recovery of Gemini 4, at the Canary Island tracking station for Gemini 6, at Cape Kennedy again for Apollo 10, and mission control in Houston for Apollo 11 and Neil Armstrong moon landing and walk. These works are included in many NASA space books in the Smithsonian Aerospace Museum, the Art Gallery at the Kennedy Space Center, and Mission Control Houston. This is my father's painting of Neil Armstrong landing and walking on the moon. In 1977, my parents traveled to Japan with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. They visited 7 Japanese cities, attended 14 concerts, which were organized by Sir George Solti. They wrote an article in Tune with Japan. This painting is a Tokyo street scene. My father did not speak or write Japanese. My understanding of this painting was that the signage read correctly. While doing my USK talk, 2,000 urban sketchers tuned in from around the world. I asked the Japanese sketchers to confirm this. They agreed the calligraphy was accurate. This painting is Sir George Solti conducting the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in Tokyo. On the upper left-hand corner, we have a painting of the Golden Pavilion, Kyoto, and below it to the left is a smorgasbord in Osaka on a rooftop restaurant. And in the middle, we have a construction site in Tokyo. The upper right-hand corner painting is Peace Memorial Park, Japanese school children visiting the site of the bombing of Hiroshima. My mother recalls, in Hiroshima, the power of Mahler's Fifth Symphony with its funeral march swept over us. And we were reminded, as we had been that afternoon in Peace Memorial Park, of the nightmare aspects of the 1945 attack, and reminded also that the first sustaining nuclear chain reaction had been achieved under Stagfield at the University of Chicago. Our guide told us that the people of Hiroshima had put this horrendous day behind them. Below we have East meets West. We are viewing two styles of wedding dresses in a hotel arcade. This is a painting of the famous Tokyo Fish Market, which opens at 4:30 in the morning. In 1987, my parents visited Istanbul for a few days and then went on a Mediterranean cruise and then on to the old city of Jerusalem. This painting on the left is the Blue Mosque, and it's the most popular site in Istanbul. It's built at the beginning of the 17th century, and it features 6 minarets rather than the customary 4. And below, we have a painting of the Galata Bridge. Is one of the 2 bridges crossing the Golden Horn. Auto and foot traffic passes over a collection of colorful restaurants and cafes. And to the right, we have the Mediterranean Sea. My mother recalls, the idea was conceived one July evening during intermission of an Ella Fitzgerald concert at Ravinia. 2 Lake Forest College professors were to escort a group of students to Greece and Turkey. Lake Bluff friends were to be in Istanbul to consult on publication of a Turkish edition of the encyclopedia. Friends from Highland Park planned to visit family in London, and Franklin and I had worked in the old city of Jerusalem. Lake Forest College professors said, the coast of Turkey is the most beautiful place on earth. Clear waters and archaeological sites are everywhere, pretty much unspoiled the way Greece used to be. Surprisingly, the casually made plans materialized. A year later, we found ourselves scoping out the Mediterranean from a yacht. Always we were conscious that our sailing took us through waters into places steep feel a mysterious breeze on our face, a faint breath of human existence lingering after thousands of years. Our all too brief odyssey about the turquoise coast hardly rivaled the voyage of Ulysses, but we had our share of discoveries along the way, and we composed an imagined frieze of an ancient past. My mother remembers it was 1987, and we had come to Jerusalem to report on the Stations of the Cross, to report on the stations as they are today, not content as biblical illustrations. They arrived early in the week to prepare for Good Friday, the way of the cross, the journey of Jesus through the streets. Franklin's artwork was transferred to ceramic tiles that depict the Stations of Cross, Jerusalem today, with text by Irene, were installed in St. Patrick's Church, 911 South Waukegan Road, Lake Forest, Illinois, during Lent of 1988. They can be visited daily from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. This is the 13th station Jesus is taken down from the cross. Many more stories are out there. My parents' 50th wedding anniversary was celebrated at the Knickerbocker Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, the same hotel where they had had their wedding reception 50 years earlier. The McMahon's family had a lovely luncheon and then a surprise reception for them in the Knickerbocker banquet room. The family went to Galena, Illinois for a week's vacation. Following the family vacation, Irene and Franklin cruised the Galapagos Islands. My parents' cruise story is included in the book. And this is a photo of the McMahon family. It was the luncheon group. The second chapter of the book is called The World is Your Studio. This includes 5 articles with a lot of historical material about reportage assignments my father did. American Artist magazine asked my father to discuss his method of working. They documented his painting procedure during a trip to Key West. In this article, my father recalls the first article he wrote for American Artist, April 1956, drawn directly with brush and ink. This article ends with a slice of 1950s Lake Forest. My father writes, I am very much interested in architecture and furniture. I feel that people are greatly affected by the environment in which they live and work, and I try to show this in my drawings. Another interest is machines. I have made a series of paintings reproducing farm machines. The side delivery rake is a really beautiful thing to contemplate. The helicopter is also a joy to see. I often take my children over to watch the mail being delivered here in Lake Forest. To stand in the middle of the field, the place where it lands is not only an airport, simply an open field with a ring for landing. And see this thing suddenly whirling in from nowhere is truly an exciting experience. This is another subject for several paintings. The illustration article includes many of my father's most important artworks. A farm machine painting, which my father received a Renaissance Prize from the Art Institute of Chicago. It includes my father's drawings for a book he illustrated on the Illinois Constitution. My father sent copies of these drawings to Life magazine. He soon heard from them and was commissioned to produce courtroom sketches at the Emmett Till trial. The drawings he did that week became his claim to fame. Coverage like this drawing depicting Reverend Moses Wright pointing at the accused murderers of his 14-year-old great-nephew helped raise the national profile of the case, which is credited as one of the events to launch the civil rights movement. Recently, the Senate voted to give the highest civilian honor to Till and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley. They will receive a Congressional Gold Medal. In January of 2022, 2 miniseries covered the Emmett Till story, The Women of the Movement and Let the World See. Franklin McMahon's Emmett Till trial drawings were included in the Let the World See. Deborah Anderson, the author whose Emmett Till book the 2 series were based on, said in his Who's Who of the Emmett Till trial that Franklin McMahon's trial drawings, which appeared in Life magazine, were the only glimpses into how witnesses appeared on the stand, since photography was not allowed while court was in session. Even sketching had to wait until recess. But McMahon sketched those moments from memory between sessions. Only one photograph taken during testimony exists. Thus, McMahon's sketches were priceless in illuminating the trial. These series and drawings are available to view on Hulu. The original artwork can be viewed at the Chicago History Museum. The Emmett Till drawings and my father's story about that week are included in my book. My father was on the faculty of the famous art school. This school was founded by Norman Rockwell. His lesson was "The world is your studio." It is included in the book. This includes many of his artworks from the 60s and the 70s. The great search continues through the McMahon children. Many are well-known writers and artists who have lived and traveled all over the world. The family continues to gather for important life events. More information about Franklin McMahon can be found on Google, Wikipedia, Chicago History Museum, the Library of Congress, Smithsonian, NASA Space Museum, YouTube, Instagram, Getty Images, and Chicago Film Archives. My book is available in paperback, hardback, and ebook, and on Amazon, and at the Lake Forest bookstore. Thank you. I appreciate your interest and I wish you all the best. And I hope the dream of peace takes us around the world.
If you click stop sharing, and then it will go to full screen. Just click the red button. There we go.
Right.
Well, thank you all for being part of this, but really, I want to thank you, Deborah, for an amazing presentation and really interesting. And I will say, I mean, I'm so pleased that the History Center has been the recipient of so many Lent pieces from the McMahon families over the years, and we have actually some of your childhood stories from the trip to Spain on display in our travel exhibit right now. So one of the things that I want to first ask you, and then we'll open it up to the full group for questions, is, you know, you talk a lot about sort of your parents' experience, but you were there. I mean, how was it being a child and living through this incredible life adventure? You got to see things most people don't see their entire lives, and you saw them before you were 18. So how do you think that informed you and your adulthood?
Well, we definitely knew a lot about civil rights. Although I don't think until I was an adult did I know about the Emmett Till trial, because I was 2 years old when the Emmett Till trial took place. And that really is my father's claim to fame. I mean, he had a lot of things that he was recognized for, but that was really one of the most important jobs that he ever had. So I really was pretty well into adulthood before I fully realized how important that was. But we knew a lot about civil rights for sure, because it just, you know, they were in Selma and they just believed in it, and they just really thought it was so important. We knew a lot about the space program because my father was, you know, in and out. And, you know, it seemed like he was home a lot, but you know, when I look at all this stuff, I'm like, gee, he was away a lot. But, you know, in school, and I think he did make a point to be home in the summer when we were out of school. And I don't feel deprived about his, you know, and although my mother, when the children had left, they traveled a lot. But that was when they did the travel writing, the travel stories. Before that, it was politics, civil rights, the Vatican, and although my mother did go on some of the trips, she would really only go once or twice a year, and then he would go more frequently. But he would go maybe for a few weeks, and then he'd be home for a month. And he had his studio in the house, so it seemed like he was around.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we learned a lot from it. You know, we talked about it at dinner time. We talked a lot about politics and civil rights and all the different subjects that he was interested in. We all kind of became experts at all those subjects. Maybe too much, but.
Well, I mean, it's an amazing life story. And then what are your memories of the Spain trip? Like that was, I mean, you were there for months, correct?
We were there for a year. Yeah. That was I did a year trip. And it was really an important time for our family. Many of us were, I think only 2 were school age. We were, and so we did go to kindergarten there. But it was an important time that a lot of important patterns were set that year. And although my father did do a lot of painting, he was influenced by Cubism that was around him. A lot of his drawings and paintings, and it's very unusual for a reportage artist he's like the only one that is influenced by Cubism. And that was due to his painting that he did in Spain. So he had some time to paint, and it was just a really good time for the family. There were patterns set that year. that went through our entire growing up years.
His work, that cover, the illustration that you had of the thrasher, I think it was, the agricultural machine, that's beautiful. I mean, that's just such an elegant style. How much did he work like that?
Well,
Was that on his own?
yeah, he did a lot of, he was acoustic paintings, and he did a lot in the 60s. And actually, he was recognized as a reportage artist, but he also was really awarded a lot for his painting. And it was the paintings he did of the farm machines, and also he did a bunch of helicopters. And the helicopter paintings, you can really see the him working out the cubist idea that he developed in, which went into his reportage work.
Mhm.
But you can really see him working that out in the helicopter paintings, which are in the Chicago area. My sister Margot has a lot of them. You might want to have them on display at the History Center sometime. But
That
you
would
can
be
really
lovely, yeah.
see the influence of the cubism in those paintings. And he's trying to work it out, you know, because it's a very unique, I mean, no other reportage artist probably in the world does cubism in their painting. But so you can see him working it out in those paintings.
The thing that's so interesting about the reportage paintings and illustrations is the vibrancy in them. Like, there's just such a sense of movement and light through all of it. The one that we have on display on Vatican II, all of the crowd scenes that he does, there's just an energy to them because of his design style that I think is really compelling. You know, it is great that his materials are collected across the region and that they're available through the Chicago History. And I'm going to ask you a question you're never going to want to answer. What's your favorite piece?
I think my favorite is the Vatican. I happen to have it. I kind of lucked out. It's the opening day of the Vatican Council, and it's the St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. It's a magnificent, many people think it's his best drawing. Now, I think maybe his most powerful drawing is the Emmett Till, where Emmett Till's uncle, we saw it here. I didn't include the Vatican one in this presentation, but the Emmett Till, the uncle pointing at the men that came and picked Emmett Till up in the middle of the night, that is probably his most powerful, most important reportage drawing. It's a painting, I guess. But also in competition with that is this Vatican drawing that I happen to have.
Which is
I didn't
very
include
nice.
the presentation because I didn't get into the Vatican subject matter.
Does the audience have any questions? Because I will ask questions endlessly. So please step in if you've got a question. Or you can there's a little hand raise thing that you can click on. But I also don't want to give short shrift to your mom, right? Because they were both really talented artists, and she was a writer, and she really honed her craft around creating a very approachable narrative. I mean, that's one of the things, even in the pieces that you read of hers, is that there's a simple elegance to the way she's writing that pulls you into the story and makes it feel like you're there. And, you know, it's fascinating that she was able to make a career out of this early on in an era in which, you know, female writers weren't really a big thing, and they particularly for travel. You know, did she ever talk about that, about being sort of a cutting edge writer in terms of breaking ground for women?
Well, I think my mother considers herself a late bloomer. Now, my parents did do these early travel writing that they did together, and her name is on that, but also my father's name. Well, my father's name, sometimes it says he and she wrote it, and sometimes it says she wrote it and he did the illustration. Now, when she got to be about 60 years old, she really got serious. I mean, she was serious. She would write like 1 or 2 articles a year that were published, but she was raising 9 children.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she got to be about 60, she got really serious about her travel writing. And she, in the book, it starts off, and she considers herself a late bloomer, and that she received her first travel writing award at the age of 65, but she received 8 Mark Twain awards over the years, and that was starting at the age of 65, and she only lived to 76. So they did a lot of traveling in those years. And also, not only did she get the Mark Twain awards, she got a lot of other awards too. But the Mark Twain's just sounds, everyone recognizes Mark Twain.
Well, that is an amazingly prestigious award. So yes, people recognize that one.
So in my book, it has all the years and the awards, and sometimes they were for, she had a monthly column with Pioneer Press. And I mean, she was published in the New York Times and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, it's all in the book. I mean, I can't say, but a lot of major publications. But she did have a monthly column, and I think it was with the Tribune. And sometimes it was maybe an award for the best column or the best. They were given for different reasons, but best monthly column or best. I forget all. It's all in my book though. All that stuff is in the book, and that's why I put the book together, partially to organize the information for my family, but then also to make it available for urban sketchers and for everyone that's interested in travel, in reportage, and really to organize the information and to make it available for, I did 2 talks. The first one was USK Talks. It was amazing. I sat in this living room that I'm sitting in. It was 11 o'clock at night. It was 4 o'clock. There was a guy in Lisbon sitting in his living room, 4 o'clock in the morning. And a guy in Hong Kong it was 11 o'clock in the morning. And we carried on this amazing conversation about my father's work. 2,000 urban sketchers from all over the world tuned into that conversation. And then I did later with the gentleman from Lisbon, I did it's called 5-Minute Drawing for the university. It's a lecture series for the University of Lisbon. And 600 urban sketchers or artists tuned in to listen to that lecture. So, I mean, to me, I find that amazing. I mean, I find this amazing that we have people tuning in from the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, and also people from all different stages of my life. I mean, this whole Zooming thing, there's a silver lining of the period that we've been in.
Yeah, I regularly say that. This has been one of the few blessings out of this, is the ability to be able to do this and do it relatively easily and quickly, and to be able to pull an audience from all over. It's been really amazing. All right, so we've got a couple questions from the audience. What type of artists are your siblings?
Well, my oldest brother was a photojournalist, worked for all the major Time, Newsweek, just many magazines. He was a freelancer, very successfy my second brother lives in Lake Forest, lives in an Edward Hallmark house, and he follows he kind of follows in my father's footsteps. He's more his style, although he has his own touch. It highly resembles my dad's, but he has his own thing going too. And he's done some murals in Lake Forest and other schools. He goes into schools and does big ceramic murals. I think there's one in Gorton Community Center. There's one at the high school. The one at McDonald's was moved over to Gorton. But he's done some other schools along the North Shore. I think there's one in Westlake Forest, in one of the schools there, one of the elementary schools. I can't remember all the names of the schools in Lake Forest, it's been a while. But he goes in and he works with the students, and he has them draw their life in the school. And then he does some drawing, and he combines it all. And they're really great murals. There's one down in the city of Chicago on the side of a parking lot. And yeah, I can't remember what streets, but they're, and that's uniquely marked. He does the drawing, transferred it to ceramic tile. Now his style highly resembles my father's style too. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. So, and then I have a master's degree in design. I taught art. And then I also, when I finished school, I moved to New York, and I worked in custom manufacturing of accessories for public spaces. And my first hospitality job was Donald Trump's first hotel. And that was in 1980. And I continued to, I worked on just tons of different hotel projects over the years. I did that for a long, long time. But the first one, hospitality one, was 1980. And I worked with a lot of hotel designers, architects on different projects. And and then my brother Hugh, he's a sculptor. He does highly known for his pumpkin carvings, which he lives in New York, and he's kind of a celebrity pumpkin carver. He's a great drawer, though. He really knows how to draw. Margot is a sculptor. She has a MFA from Yale, and she's done some teaching. She's also done some writing. She's recently published 3 books, and she's doing a lot of film now. She was just over this week. She did, when St. Patrick's Church remodeled, she did this sculpture for the church remodel. Mm-hmm. And so she was over there this week taking photos, or doing a film actually of the of the church and all of her sculpture. I'm not sure what she's using it for. I just saw the film. And she was over doing a film of the house we lived on Mayflower Road. She wrote a book about its name. The house on Mayflower Road is named Adreer, and it's a Scottish, was influenced by a castle in Scotland. So she was over there. The title of her book is the title of the house. So she was over there doing a film. It's quite interesting because she has a paint. She's the 7th McMahon. She calls herself the lucky number 7. And she has, my father did paintings of all the kids. And the one that he did of Margot is in his studio. So she went back to the house, and she sat in the exact same place where she sat for my dad. And she has the painting that my dad did. And then there's, of course, this was when Margot was like 5 years old. And now she's like 45 years old, or I don't know, probably 60 years old. I don't know how old she is. But so then it has her sitting there and her daughter sitting there with her. But it's what now is a living room, used to be my dad's studio, because the house we had on Mayflower Road was one of those big houses. And they had changed the living room into my father's studio. And then what was the library was the living room of the house. So she went and did, she did a lot of, then my dad had an office, which, it was a lovely film, and she has it, and you might at some point want to have her talk about her book, which is named, same name as the house, but then she has this film which shows, it's not all the rooms of the house, but it's the dining room and the kind of the library, and what now is the living room, which used to be my father's studio. And she also did a painting of the courtyard of the house. It's the best courtyard in Lake Forest. The house has the best courtyard. And she did a painting of that in the front of the house. And so she starts off with her painting, and then you walk into the house. That the whole filming of it is quite interesting. Then you walk in and it's a lovely kind of carved front hallway, and then she goes into her painting, or my dad's painting of her, and then it goes to her sitting there at the same spot. Now she's probably 60 years old, I guess. I don't know how old she is, but so there's a painting of her sitting at the same spot with her daughter. And then you get an overview of the whole room, which used to be my dad's studio, but it's now someone's living room. They allowed her to come back into the house. And then she went into the dining room, and the house looked out over Lake Michigan, so you got a view of the lake. It's a lovely film. And the book is about her growing up in this house and her coming of age in this house. So, but she seems the films she's been doing lately, I find more interesting. Now, I don't think she's actually doing the filming. I think she has someone working with her.
Doing the actual filming. She's overseeing it.
You know, they're nice films though. And of course we like them because although I've been back to the house on Mayflower Road, I haven't been back there for some time. So it was really nice to be able to see it again and just remember and all that.
Well, thank you for that. All right, we have time for one more question. Steve has very politely had his hand up. So Steve, what's your question?
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm with Steve.
Okay, sorry.
I don't have a name, no, that's okay. I was reflecting on really in some ways the courage of how he would draw and document what was going on in the world. And I wondered if you didn't imagine what he would be doing today. If you reflect on the way he fearlessly, just would document what was happening. And it's interesting to me to reflect on how it would be wonderful to have someone like that today. It would be great.
Well, actually, there are people, the urban sketching, it's really taken on as a huge movement in the last 10 or 12 years. Mm-hmm. There's a guy in Washington State that worked for, I think he still works for him. He gave up his column, but he works for the Washington newspaper. Mm-hmm. And he's organized, and this was the group that I did these talks for. He's brought together urban sketchers from all over the world. And it's really a growing movement. I mean, it's already a big happening. I mean, just the fact I did a talk at 11 o'clock at night, 2,000 people tuned in for this talk. I mean, to me, I find it amazing. Yeah. And then I did for this other group, this university group, 600 people. And not all of it were from the University of Lisbon. They have an international following because of this one guy that organized both these lecture series were developed because of COVID, and people couldn't go out and sketch. The urban sketchers, they go out into the world and they sketch, and they go out as a group. And so they couldn't do that. So they organized these lectures to hold people together. And then also it's the same guy that kind of got the thing going with both groups. But school, everyone was online, and so they organized these lectures. But they're amazing lectures. I mean, I can't say I've listened to all of them, but they've really made it a smaller world. They now have at the University of Lisbon, or Urban Sketching Group out of Lisbon, has this class you can take on Saturday. There's an urban sketcher. It's not every Saturday, I think it's twice a month, where they take the best teachers out of the whole world teaching urban sketching. And you can take a class, it's a one-day class, and it's like 30 different sessions from all these great urban sketchers all over the world. Mm-hmm. So you have this opportunity, and they're very inexpensive classes. So you have this opportunity to study with these amazing people that many of them are affiliated with universities, or some of them are with newspapers, but it's really made it a smaller world. And this guy in Washington organized these urban sketchers, and it's an amazing community, so supportive of their group. And today someone posted in the group, you know, drawings that he had done of people in the Ukraine. And, you know, just has made it's a small world.
Well, I think the depiction of historical events and experiences through art is something we don't get to see nearly as much as we did, you know, coming up in the world, or art, even photographic art, you know, opening up a big Look magazine, Life magazine post. I lived in the home of Norman Rockwell for years, and it's just a part of documenting life that is kind of missing from the world today. And I was struck by that as I looked at your father's work. It's truly breathtaking. It captures things not with a video camera, not with the 24-hour cycle, but really beautifully. It really does. And it's a big gap, I think, in the way we're documenting. So I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Could I ask could I say one more thing? My name is Eleanor Clark, and I grew up on Greenwood Avenue. I didn't grow up, my family grew up on Greenwood Avenue, right at the bottom of the street, and you lived at the top. And my parents bought the house. We bought the house in '59 and raised our children there. And my first outing on the street was to go to a coffee. And I met your mother at the coffee. They had a coffee for me because I was the new bride on the block. And that was where I first met your mother. And I was so attracted to her at that time. She just made an amazing impression on me. And later, I'd seen her a lot at church, etc. And then we started a board for Catholic Charities. And she was part of our founding group. And she helped us start the benefit that we had every year. And our benefit was an art show. And so your mother was very instrumental in getting artists for us to exhibit, but then they would sell their art also. So it was a benefit for Catholic Charities. And so that was another time in my life that I had this fond memory of her. Felt very, very inspired by her person. She was so serene, so kind and bright. And then they went and stayed in our home in Colorado, and he did some drawings of the mountains around our home. And he did also a drawing of our home. And I really got some for each one of my children because I wanted them to have one of them. And your brother Mark brought over some of these drawings this fall. And so I got some for the children, and I already had one that he had done as a gift. And then now I have this one of the whole panorama of our home of the mountains. And it's just such a gift. And I have it in my house here. And it just, you know, it brings back such beautiful memories of them and our beautiful views. And then I bought a beautiful painting of his of the Paris Opera. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but it's lovely.
In one of my talks that I did, if you look up 5-minute drawing, University of Lisbon, Franklin McMahon, I talked about that painting in that.
Do
talk.
you? Really? It's in my living room.
So
I have it in my living room.
5-minute drawing, University of Lisbon, Franklin McMahon. The talk will come up.
Oh, it will. Oh, wonderful to know. I'd love that.
In the Telluride area?
Yes, we're in Telluride.
Oh, I stayed at your house.
You did? Oh my gosh. You were in the house with them.
I think I was there on that trip with them.
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
It's a beautiful home.
Well, it was wonderful because I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I love to have people enjoy it. But it was such a gift to us to have. He did this fabulous drawing of our house that was just, my son studied to be an architect. So I gave it to him for Christmas, and it's just a fabulous drawing. And my son was, oh, Mom, you've never shown me this before. And I said, well, I just saw it that Mr. McMahon did. But also we bought a lot of Mark's landmark drawings of Chicago and buildings that my husband had been involved in real estate, and just landmarks that my husband loved. And so we collected some of those. But I love Mark. He's wonderful.
Yeah, he's great. I think
And
he
he,
might
and
be
he,
online here. At least he was supposed to be. I'm not sure. I think he might be online here.
oh, well, anyway, I'm singing his praises.
Well, he loves that.
Well, thank you for this. It was really inspiring.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
All right, well, we are now past time. I want to thank you so much for a lovely presentation. This was really great. And for the rest of you in the audience, we have a couple upcoming programs that will wrap up the series that we're doing on travel lectures. Backpacking Ambassadors is on March 3rd, and I don't think it's, oh yeah, that Thursday. That one will actually be focused on how youth travel really completely restructures Europe. After the war, after World War II, it becomes really difficult for for travel because of all of the bombing and all the deconstruction. And one of the things that they do is they actively market to students in order to rebuild the country. And in several countries actually use students to do that work. It's a fascinating talk, and it's well worth checking out that lecture again on the 3rd, that Thursday. Little Historians, which is a program that we do on a regular basis now, is 2 p.m. on the 5th. And then we are doing another series on the history of the hospital, and this one is on the Women's Board in Lake Forest College, and that will be on April 7th. This has been recorded, so for anybody who misses it, it will be available probably sometime tomorrow or the next day. Deborah, I want to thank you. Really beautiful job, and congratulations on the book. And for those of you who don't have it already, it's available both through Amazon and at Lake Forest Bookstore.
Thank you very much. This was a lot of fun.
Excellent.